When working with the layer stack, you got to know how to reset if you want to continue in the same layer stack and try something different. So I've got a starter file here. And this should look familiar because this is where we ended back, I think, in part 4. So I'm going to turn that off. How do we get back to there? How do we produce that? Well, let's scroll down to the bottom of our layer stack. Here's where we ended, part 4. So you hold down Option, click on the eyeball, and you turn off everything other than that layer. Then you come up the layer stack to find where you were, and we were on this S-curve layer, and then it's Shift-Option-Command-N-E, which will merge everything visible onto this layer. And see how that, I didn't do it, but Shift-Option-Command-N gives you a new layer. Here, Shift-Option-Command-N, and then E. And if I turn this on, there's no change whatsoever. So that is exactly how I made this layer. You click there and hit delete. And then we're ready for the next step, which is Shift-Option-Command-N, Shift-Option-Command-E, Shift-Option-Command-O, and now we got a smart object. And now we're ready to use that radial blur. Remember that? Option or Control Option Command R, which brings up the radial blur dialog box. And this is a little tiny box. And I mentioned before that during the summers before COVID, I'd go to Adobe's headquarters and we got to meet with the head of the different teams. And this is, I told you, this is one of the two things that we used the path blur I spoke to the guy about, showing him how I created geometry. Well, the second thing was the radial blur. When I pulled this up, he said, gosh, that's one of the oldest features in Photoshop. Like, why would anyone use that? And then I showed him what I did with it. And what I showed him didn't have anything to do with this. It was having to do with taking photographs and making astounding geometry, things that were really engaging. And it was like, whoa. And he says, well, what do you want me to, what should we do? How could this be better? And I said, give us a preview here. Because when we move this, you can move the center. Warning, Will Robinson, if you move this, the only way to reset it is to quit Photoshop and relaunch it. Otherwise, every time you pull this up, whenever you move this, it will always be in the spot you moved it to. Oh, I'll just move it back to the center. Yeah, good luck with that. Because there's no way to know if you're exactly in the center. So we're going to, by default, I think this is on spin, good, and 10. I think that's the default. Well, virtually never. I changed this to zoom. I changed this to best and pulled this all the way over to 100. And then click OK. And because, I have this layer turned off, nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to turn this layer on, and you're going to see the results of blur and blend. And you might say, whoa, that's kind of different. But when you try it, that's not what you're going to see. You want to know what you're going to see? You're going to see this. That's what you're going to see. And you're going to go, that's terrible. Yeah, it is, until you change the blend mode. And in this case, I used lighten. And I left the opacity at 100%. So, what do you think? What just happened? Watch an area like this where we've got really light, medium, and dark, and medium dark. So watch right here. I'm going to move my cursor. Just keep your eye fixed here, and I'm going to turn this off. Whoops. I'm going to turn it off up above. Sorry. There it is. And notice how it smoothed out those differences between medium dark and medium dark. See how they're so similar? Right here, right here. The results on this will vary depending upon what you're doing. But radial blur and motion blur and path blur all are ways to pull out visual interest in geometry. They're also ways to utterly obliterate anything interesting. And the first time you see this stuff, you think, oh, that's so cool. Okay, show me where's the focal point. Where is the interest? How is this worth looking at? You know, this garish center, which doesn't make any sense. Now, you might try lowering the opacity and see what happens there, because you do get different effects. And I'll let you play with that on your own. But for right now, I'm going to leave this on light and just say, that was worth the price of admission, don't you think? And since we're here and we got some extra stuff to come, make a new layer, merge everything, turn it into a sharp object, open up the camera raw filter, and say, okay, how'd you do that? How'd you soften up everything and still add some contrast? Do you see it? Here's the secret. I'm going to double click on the camera raw filter, and this is the beauty of these smart objects and smart filters, is you can always go back and see. Pull out your notepad and write ECHS, all the way down, and then the TCD. I didn't touch vibrance and saturation, but notice, here's the key, -100 at texture and clarity set to -53. When you go into the negatives in texture and clarity, you soften edges. I'll hit the letter P so you can see before and after. Before and after. And then all of these other settings as well. Now, do I want you to do these exactly? Yes, because we're going to try to arrive at a similar result at the end. And I say similar because there's a step coming up that we have to guess at. We don't have figures that we can depend on. But these simple tricks, can you use this on photographs with masks? There's the key. With masks, yes, absolutely. Are they worthwhile? Well, if used correctly. There's 1,000 ways to make it look terrible for every way you can make it look good. The only way to start to wrap your head around this is to begin thinking in Photoshop.